Hi Mark, I'm Lily and my Chinese name is Zhen Liping. My student number is 7. I'm the freshman. The title of the speech is Everything You Hear on Film is a Lie, and the speaker of the speech is Tasos Frantzolas. I want to start by doing an experiment. I'm going to play 3 videos of a rainy day, but I've placed the audio of one of the videos, and instead of the sound of rain, I've added the sound of bacon frying. So I want you to think carefully which one the clip with the bacon is. Rain falls, rain falls, rain falls. Alright, actually I lied. They're all bacon. Bacon sizzles. Applause. My point here isn't really to make you hungry every time you see a rainy scene, but it's to show that our brains are conditioned to embrace the lies. We're not looking for accuracy. So on the subject of deception, I wanted to quote one of my favorite authors in The Decay of Lying. Oscar Wilde established the idea that all bad art comes from copying nature and being realistic, and all great art comes from lying and deceiving and telling beautiful, untrue things. So when you're watching a movie and the phone rings, it's not actually ringing. It's been added later in post-production in the studio. All of the sounds you hear are fake. Everything apart from the dialogue is fake. When you watch a movie and you see a bird flapping its wing flap, they haven't really recorded the bird. It sounds a little more realistic if you record a sheet or shaking kitchen gloves flaps. The burning of a cigarette up close. Cigarette burns. It actually sounds a lot more authentic if you take a small saran wrap ball and release it. A saran wrap ball being released. Punches, punch. Oops, let me play that again. Punch. That's often done by sticking a knife in vegetables, usually cabbage. Cabbage stabbed with a knife. The next one is breaking bones. Bones break. Well, no one was really harmed. It's actually breaking celery or frozen lettuce. Breaking frozen lettuce or celery. Laughter. Making the right sound is not always as easy as a trip to the supermarket and going to the vegetable section, but it's often a lot more complicated than that. So let's reverse. Engineer together the creation of a sound effect. One of my favorite stories comes from Frank Serafini. He's a contributor to our library and a great sound designer for Tron and Star Trek and others. He was part of the Paramount team that won the Oscar for Best Sound for The Hunt for Red October. In this Cold War classic in the 90s, they were asked to produce the sound of the propeller of the submarine. So they had a small problem. They couldn't really find a submarine in West Hollywood. So basically, what they did is they went to a friend's swimming pool and Frank performed a cannonball or bomba. They placed an underwater mic and an overhead mic outside the swimming pool. So here's what the underwater mic sounds like. Underwater plunge. Adding the overhead mic, it sounds like a bit like this. Water splashes. So now they took the sound and pitched it one octave down, sort of like slowing down a record. Water splashes at lower octave, and then they remove a lot of the high frequencies. Water splash, and pitch it down another octave. Water splashes at lower octave, and then added a little bit of the splash from the overhead microphone. Water splashes, and by looping and repeating that sound, they got this. Propeller churns. So creativity and technology put together in order to create the illusion that we're inside the submarine. But once you've created your sounds and you have synced them to the image, You want those sounds to live in the world of the story, and one of the best way to do that is to add reverb. So this is the first audio tool I want to talk about. Reverberation or reverb is the persistence of the sound after the original sound has ended. So it's sort of like all the reflections from the materials, the objects, and the walls around the sound. Take, for example, the sound of a gunshot. The original sound is less than half a second long. Gunshots. By adding reverb, we can make it sound like it was recorded inside a bathroom. Gunshots reverbs in the bathroom, or like it was recorded inside a chapel or a church. Gunshots reverbs church, or in the canyon. Gunshots reverb in canyon. So reverb gives a lot of information about the space between the listener and the original sound source. If the sound is the text, then reverb is sort of like the smell of the sound. But reverb can do a lot more. Listening to a sound with a lot less reverberation than the on-screen action is going to immediately signify to us that we are listening to a commentator, to an objective narrator that's not participating in the on-screen action. Also, emotionally intimate moments in cinema are often heard with zero reverb, because that's how it would sound if someone was speaking inside our ear. On the completely other side, adding a lot of reverb to a voice is going to make us think that we're listening to a flashback, or perhaps that we're inside the head of a character, or that we're listening to the voice of God, or even more powerful in film, Morgan Freeman. Laughter, so applause. But what are some other tools or hacks that sound designers use? Well, here's a really big one. It's silence. A few moments of silence is going to make us pay attention. And in the Western world, we are not really used to verbal silence. They are considered awkward or rude. So silence preceding verbal communication can create a lot of tension. But imagine a really big Hollywood movie where it's full of explosion and automatic guns. Loud stops being loud anymore after a while. So in a yin-yang way, silence needs loudness and loudness needs silence for either of them to have an effect. But what does silence mean? Well, it depends on how it's used in each film. Silence can place us inside the heart of the character or provoke thoughts. We often relate silence with contemplation, meditation, being deep in thoughts. But apart from having one meaning, silence becomes a blank canvas upon which the viewer is invited to the paint of their own thoughts. But I want to make it clear, there's no such thing as silence, and I know this sounds like the most pretentious TED Talk statement ever. But even if you were to enter a room with zero reverberation and zero external sounds, you would still be able to hear the pumping of your own blood. And in cinema, traditionally there was never a silence moment because of the sounds of the projector. And even in today's Dolby world, there's not really any moments of silence if you listen around you. There's always some sort of noise. Now, since there's no such thing as silence, what do filmmakers and sound designers use? Well, as a synonym, they often use ambiences. Ambiences are the unique background sounds that are specific to each location. Each location has a unique sound, and each room has a unique sound, which is called room tone. So here's a recording of a market in Morocco. Voices, music. And here's a recording of Times Square in New York. Traffic sounds, car horns, voices. Room tone is the addition of all the noises inside the room. The ventilation, and heating in the fridge. Here's a recording of my apartment in Brooklyn. You can hear the ventilation and boiler, and the fridge and street traffic. Ambiances work in the most primal way. They can speak directly to our brain subconsciously. So birds chirping outside your window may indicate normality, perhaps because as a species, we have been used to that sound every morning for millions of years. Bird chirp. On the other hand, industrial sounds have been introduced to us a little more recently, even though I really like them personally. They have been used by one of my heroes, David Lynch, and his sound designer Alan Speltz. Industrial sounds often carry negative connotations. Machine noises. Now, sound effects can tap into our emotional memory. Occasionally, they can be so significant that they become a character in the movie. The sound of thunder may indicate divine intervention or anger. Thunder. Church bells can remind us of the passing of time, or perhaps our own mortality. Bells ring, and breaking of glass can indicate the end of a relationship or a friendship. Glass breaks. Scientists believe that dissonant sounds, for example, brass or wind instruments played very loud, may remind us of animal owls in nature and therefore creates a sense of irritation or fear. Brass and wind instruments play. So now we have spoken about on-screen sounds, but occasionally the source of a sound cannot be seen. That's what we call off-screen sounds, or acousmatic. Acousmatic sounds. Well, the term acousmatic comes from the Pythagoras in ancient Greece, who used to teach behind a veil or curtain for years, not revealing himself to his disciples. I think the mathematician and philosopher thought that in that way his student might focus more on the voice and his words and its meaning, rather than the visual of him speaking. So sort of like the Wizard of Oz or 1980s Big Brother, separating the voice from its source, separating cause and effects, sort of creates a sense of ubiquity or panopticence, and therefore authority. There's a strong tradition of acousmatic sound. Nuns in monasteries in Rome and Venice used to sing in rooms up in galleries close to the ceiling, creating the illusion that we're listening to angels up in the sky. Richard Wagner famously created the hidden orchestra that was placed in the pit between the stage and the audience, and one of my heroes, FX Twin, famously hid in dark corners of clubs. I think what all these masters knew is that by hiding the source, you create a sense of mystery. This has been seen in cinema over and over, with Hitchcock and Ridley Scott in Alien. Hearing a sound without knowing its source is going to create some sort of tension. Also, it can minimize certain visual restrictions that directors have and can show something that wasn't there during filming. And if all this sounds a little theoretical, I wanted to play a little video. Toy squeaks, typewriter, drums, ping pong, knives being sharpened, record scratches, saw cuts, woman screams. What I'm sort of trying to demonstrate with this tour is that sound is a language. It can trick us by transporting us geographically. It can change the mood. It can set the pace. It can make us laugh or it can make us scared. On a personal level, I fell in love with that language a few years ago and somehow managed to make it into some sort of perfection. I think with our work through the sound library, we're trying to kind of expand the vocabulary of that language, and in that way, we want to offer the right tool to sound designers, filmmakers, and video game and app designers to keep telling even better stories and creating even more beautiful lives. So thanks for listening. Applause.